Section 1. The calm before the cruelty. For the longest time, our little cul-de-sac felt like a safe bubble tucked away from the noise of the world. The mornings smelled of fresh-cut grass and coffee, and the evenings were filled with porch lights and laughter. My daughter, Lily, loved it here. She would sit on our front porch every afternoon with her service dog, Buddy, a golden retriever with soft caramel fur and the gentlest soul I'd ever known, and watch the neighbors walk their dogs, kids ride bikes, or the mail truck make its steady rounds. Lily was 8 years old, small for her age, with a bright pink wheelchair that glittered in the sunlight and a laugh that could melt the iciest heart. She had cerebral palsy, which made it hard for her to move without help. But Buddy changed everything. He wasn't just her service dog, he was her lifeline. He could open doors, pick up or drop toys, and steady her when she tried to move from chair to couch. But most importantly, he gave her freedom. With Buddy, Lily could go outside and play. She could chase bubbles, talk to the other kids, and feel like she wasn't different. Our neighbors adored her. Well, almost all of them. There was one exception, Karen Whitmore, president of the Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association. She was the kind of woman who wore pearls to the mailbox and carried her clipboard like a sword. Her lawn looked like a golf course. Her shrubs were trimmed into perfect spheres, and her personality was about as soft as sandpaper. At first, she acted polite enough, smiling tight-lipped when we moved in, waving in that overly practiced way people do when they're silently judging. But soon after Buddy arrived, the complaints started. "Your dog barks too much," she said one morning, striding up our driveway, uninvited while Lily played in the yard. "He barked once." I replied, startled. A squirrel ran past. "It's a violation of HOA noise standards," she sniffed, scribbling something on her clipboard. "He's a service animal, Karen," I said, emphasizing the word like she might have missed it. "Federal law protects." "I'm well aware of the law," she cut me off sharply. "But this is a residential community, not a kennel. There are rules, and rules apply to everyone." She turned and walked away before I could respond. Buddy looked up at me with those soulful brown eyes, sensing my frustration. I reached down and patted his head. "It's okay, boy," I whispered. "She'll get over it." But she didn't. Over the next few weeks, she escalated. We started getting letters in the mail, official HOA correspondence accusing us of property violations. Things like unauthorized signage because Lily had drawn a chalk rainbow on the sidewalk, or improper storage because Buddy's water bowls sit near the porch railing. It became a daily ritual. I'd come home from work, sort the mail, and find another thick envelope stamped with the HOA logo. At first, I tried to reason with her. I showed her Buddy's certification papers, explained his role, even offered to let her meet him so she could see how calm and well-trained he was. She refused. "I don't need to meet the animal," she said with that pinched, patronizing tone she reserved for anyone she considered beneath her. "I just need you to follow the rules." The more she pushed, the more Lily retreated. My once bright girl began to hesitate before going outside. She'd ask me, "Daddy, does Mrs. Karen not like Buddy? Did he do something bad?" It broke me every time. I'd kneel beside her wheelchair, stroke her hair, and tell her the truth, that sometimes people fear what they don't understand. Buddy has always stayed close. He slept at her bedside, followed her wheelchair like a shadow, and seemed to know when she was sad. When her legs cramped or she dropped something, he was there before she even asked. He'd rest his head on her lap until she smiled again. Then one afternoon, Karen crossed a line. I was fixing the fence in the backyard when I heard her voice, sharp, commanding, from the front. "You can't have that dog here, young lady." My heart froze. By the time I made it around the house, I saw Karen standing in the middle of our driveway, arms crossed, while Lily sat frozen in her wheelchair, tears welling in her eyes. Buddy stood in front of her, protective but calm, tail tucked low. "He's my helper," Lily stammered, her voice trembling. Karen sneered. "Service or not, he's too big. The HOA clearly states that large animals are not permitted outside designated hours. Do you understand that?" "She's 8. I shouted as I rushed over. "What on earth is wrong with you?" Karen didn't even flinch. "You need to keep that animal inside, or I'll have no choice but to call animal control." I've already spoken to the board about this. I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to explode. Karen, listen to me carefully. Buddy is a federally protected service dog. You touch him or even threaten to remove him, and you'll be violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. You'll be sued so fast your pearls will spin. Her eyes narrowed, her smile thin as glass. You think the law scares me? We'll see who the community supports when the board votes. Then she turned on her heel and walked off, her heels clicking like a metronome of arrogance. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. She kept calling for Buddy, clutching his fur while whispering she won't take you, right? I promised her she wouldn't. But as I tucked her in, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing in my chest. Karen was obsessed, and obsessed people don't stop just because they're wrong. Outside, Buddy sat by the window, staring toward Karen's house across the street, his ears alert, his tail still. And in the faint glow of the porch light, I could have sworn I saw movement, someone standing in her window watching us. Watching them. Section 2. The theft the morning started like any other. The air was cool and quiet, the kind of peace you only get right before dawn. I was in the kitchen making pancakes while Lily sat on the porch, bundled in her favorite blanket, Buddy beside her with his chin resting on her lap. She was humming softly, some Disney tune she always sang when she was happy. For a while, everything felt okay again. Then the phone rang. It was work, something urgent about a missing document I had to send immediately. I told Lily I'd be just a few minutes. She nodded, brave and sweet as always, and patted Buddy's head. "Stay with me, okay?" she said. His tail thumped once, a promise. I stepped inside, pulled up my laptop, and sent the file. Maybe 5 minutes passed, 10 at most. But when I came back to the porch, everything was wrong. Lily's blanket was on the ground. Her wheelchair was half on the porch, half turned toward the street. And Buddy was gone. Lily? My heart raced as I ran out. She wasn't there. My eyes darted up and down the street, and that's when I saw her. She was on the sidewalk near the corner, her tiny hands gripping her wheelchair rims, struggling to move. Her face was red, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Daddy," she sobbed. She took Buddy. I sprinted toward her, my stomach twisting. "What? Who took him?" "Mrs. Karen." Lily cried. She said Buddy wasn't allowed here anymore. She said she was taking him to the shelter. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The world tilted. I looked down the street, and sure enough, there was Karen marching toward her white SUV with Buddy's leash in her hand. Buddy was barking and pulling, trying to get back to Lily, but Karen yanked hard, shouting, "Quiet. You'll go back once this nonsense is sorted out." "Hey!" I roared. My voice echoed across the cul-de-sac. "Karen, let go of my dog." She froze, turning slowly like a villain caught mid-act. "Your dog is in violation of HOA regulations," she said coldly. "The board has the right to impound animals kept in violation of policy. That's not even remotely legal." I shouted, running up the street. "You can't take a service animal. Are you insane?" Karen's lips curled. "If you can't follow the rules, perhaps you shouldn't live in a community with standards." Before I could reach her, she shoved Buddy into her car and slammed the door. He barked, frantic, pawing at the window as the engine started. Lily screamed his name, her voice cracking with panic. I stood in front of her car, hands raised. "You move that vehicle, Karen," and I swear to God, she didn't even hesitate. The tires screeched as she swerved around me and sped off down the street, Buddy's barking fading into the distance. For a moment, everything went silent. Then I heard Lily crying, gasping, "He tried to come back to me, Daddy. He tried so hard." I ran to her, dropping to my knees beside her wheelchair, pulling her close. She clung to my shirt, trembling. "It's okay," I whispered, though my voice broke. "I'll bring him home. I promise." But as I looked down the empty road, that promise felt heavier than I could bear. The next hours were chaos. I called the police, animal control, even the HOA emergency line. Every minute that passed without Buddy felt like another knife twist. The dispatcher's voice was calm but detached. "Sir, if she took the animal under a claim of HOA authority, It's a civil dispute. You'll need to file a report. Civil dispute? I snapped. She kidnapped a service animal and left my disabled daughter in the road. The officer paused. We'll send a patrol car. It took them 30 minutes. By then, I'd driven through every nearby street, every park, every lot, calling Buddy's name until my throat hurt. Nothing. When the cruiser finally pulled up in front of our house, I felt like I was standing in someone else's life, like this couldn't possibly be happening in my quiet, tidy neighborhood. The officer was young, polite, but uncertain. Sir, we can file a theft report and contact local shelters. Do you have any documentation showing the animal is a registered service dog? I handed him everything: Buddy's certification, vet papers, training license, even photos of him working with Lily. The officer nodded, impressed. You've got solid proof. If she took him without consent, that's criminal interference with a service animal. That's serious. Lily was inside with my sister by then, shaking and exhausted. When the officer asked if she could describe what happened, I said she doesn't need to relive that. Just find him. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with the light on, staring at Karen's dark house across the street. Her blinds were closed, her driveway empty. But the rage inside me was bright enough to burn. By morning, I was done waiting. I drove straight to the HOA office, a small, glass-front building 2 blocks from the community park. The receptionist looked up nervously as I slammed a folder onto the counter. I want to know, I said through gritted teeth, why your president thinks she can steal a child service dog. The woman's eyes widened. Sir, I don't think. Check the security feed. I cut in. You'll see her. 10:17 a.m. yesterday. White SUV. License plate QNZ 4021. When she hesitated, I leaned in. Do it. Now. 10 minutes later, she came back pale. Mr. Parker, I think you should speak to the board. Immediately. The board members trickled in, 3 of them, all looking more nervous than guilty. They hadn't known. Karen hadn't told anyone. She'd acted entirely on her own. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. Then where's my dog? They exchanged glances. One of them, an older man with silver hair, finally said quietly, we'll call her. But she might have taken him to the county shelter. I was already dialing. It took 2 shelters before I found him. Yes, the woman on the phone said, we have a golden retriever brought in by a Ms. Whitmore. She said the dog was abandoned. Abandoned. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I'm on my way. When I got there, Buddy's tail started wagging the second he saw me through the gate. His bark was hoarse, his fur matted from stress, but the moment they opened the door, he bounded into my arms. I buried my face in his neck, the smell of dirt and shampoo mixing with relief and fury. But this wasn't over. As I drove home with Buddy resting his head on my shoulder, I made a silent vow. Karen wasn't just going to face HOA complaints or fines. She was going to face justice. Because she hadn't just stolen a dog, she'd taken a lifeline. She'd left my disabled daughter alone in the road. And no amount of fake smiles or clipped hedges would save her from what was coming next. Section 3. The hunt for justice. The day I brought Buddy home should have felt like victory. But when Lily saw him, when she threw her arms around his neck and sobbed into his fur, it didn't feel like winning. It felt like patching a wound that should never have been inflicted. She didn't want to let him go for hours. Buddy, loyal as ever, stayed by her side, tail gently thumping, his brown eyes fixed on her like he was making sure she'd never disappear again. But beneath that fragile peace, I was boiling. Karen had crossed a line that no apology, no excuse, could erase. It wasn't just theft, it was cruelty. She had seen a child, my child, crying on the side of the road, and she'd driven away without a shred of remorse. I wasn't going to let that slide. The first step was documentation. I compiled everything: photos, texts, emails, and the police report. The shelter's intake form listed Karen's name, address, and signature claiming abandonment. That was a felony lie written in ink. I sent copies to the officer handling the case, then forwarded them to the HOA board. The board's response was immediate and panicked. Janet, the vice president, called me personally. Mr. Parker, she began, her voice low and shaky. We had no idea she'd do something like that. Karen acted without authorization. The board wants to formally apologize. I let out a humorless laugh. An apology? She left my daughter alone in the road. Do you understand how dangerous that was? She could have been hit by a car. She could have. I stopped myself, swallowing the anger that burned at the back of my throat. An apology isn't enough. I want her removed from the board. Permanently. Janet hesitated. She's been president for 8 years. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. I snapped. Or I'll make it very public. And that's when the tide started to turn. Word spread fast. It always does in neighborhoods like ours, where gossip travels faster than Wi-Fi. One mother saw Lily crying that day and told another. Someone else had seen Karen's SUV speeding away. Within 48 hours, the story was everywhere: Facebook groups, Nextdoor threads, even the town's subreddit. HOA President steals service dog from disabled child. Read one post that got nearly 100 comments before Karen begged the moderators to take it down. But the damage was done. Neighbors who'd once feared her clipboard began crossing the street to avoid her. The old ladies who used to attend her garden club stopped showing up. Someone even slipped a note into her mailbox that simply read, "You went too far." Meanwhile, I was building a legal case. My brother-in-law, a lawyer, helped draft a formal complaint citing interference with a service animal, neglect, and emotional endangerment of a disabled minor. The police updated our report from civil dispute to criminal investigation. And when I handed them the shelter paperwork with her forged signature, the officer's tone changed entirely. "This isn't just a fine," he said, flipping through the pages. "This could go to the DA." Still, Karen tried to defend herself. She called me one afternoon, her voice sharp and brittle. "You've blown this out of proportion," she said. "I was enforcing HOA regulations. If your animal had proper documentation displayed—" I cut her off. "He's a service dog, Karen. He doesn't need a tag on his vest for you to treat him like a living being. You left my daughter in the road." There was silence on the line. For a second, I thought maybe she'd break, maybe she'd realize what she'd done. But then she said coldly, "You people always play the victim. Maybe if you'd trained your child to be more responsible." I hung up. That was the moment I stopped seeing her as a petty bully and started seeing her for what she really was: a dangerous narcissist who thought she was untouchable. So I made sure she wasn't. I sent a full packet of evidence to a local reporter who'd covered HOA abuse cases before. I didn't use dramatic words or embellishments, just the facts: the theft, the shelter paperwork, the police report, and a photo of Lily holding Buddy, her eyes still red from crying. 2 days later, the headline hit: "Community in uproar after HOA president accused of stealing disabled child service dog." It spread like wildfire. News vans rolled into the neighborhood, cameras catching Karen slamming her door on reporters, her perfect suburban empire crumbling in real time. Parents who used to nod politely at her now glared. People she'd fined or insulted for years suddenly had a reason to fight back. The HOA board held an emergency meeting in the clubhouse. I wasn't invited, but half the neighborhood showed up demanding answers. When Karen tried to speak, she was shouted down. "She left a child on a road," someone yelled. "She abused her power," another shouted. "She should be in jail." Janet later told me it was chaos. Karen's hands shook as she tried to read from her notes, but her voice was drowned out by outrage. When she stormed out, her clipboard fell from her grasp, papers scattering like confetti in the wind. That night, she came to my house one last time. I saw her standing at the end of the driveway, pale, shaking, her pearl necklace slightly askew. "You destroyed my life," she hissed. "No, Karen," I said quietly, stepping onto the porch. "You did that yourself." Her eyes were wild. "You'll regret this." "Not as much as you will." She turned and walked away, shoulders stiff, fury radiating from her like heat. Buddy stood beside me, growling low. I placed a hand on his head. "It's okay, boy," I whispered. "She's almost done." because the next morning, she wasn't president anymore. The board voted unanimously to remove her. They issued a formal public statement condemning her actions and banning her from any future leadership roles in the association. The local paper followed up with an editorial calling her a symbol of unchecked power gone wrong. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. Not yet. Not until she understood what real accountability felt like. Because while she might have lost her title, she hadn't lost her arrogance. Not yet. And I wasn't quite finished making sure she did. Section 4. The reckoning. By the time the leaves started to turn that autumn, the air in our neighborhood felt different. Quiet, but not peaceful, like the moments after a storm when you can still smell the lightning. The HOA that once ruled with Karen's iron fist now stumbled around, embarrassed, trying to rebuild its image. People were friendlier, more open, less afraid. For the first time in years, no one whispered when they walked their dogs past her house. They just shook their heads. But I wasn't satisfied. Not yet. Because Karen hadn't said sorry. Not once. Not to Lily. Not to me. Not even to herself. She was still pretending to be the victim. Still twisting the story into some bizarre tale where she was misunderstood, and I was harassing her. I'd seen her letters to the HOA board, full of self-pity and half-truths. She claimed the media had defamed her and that my daughter's story was manipulated for attention. That was when I knew I couldn't let it end with a press release. I had one more call to make. It wasn't to the police this time. It was to a friend of mine named Daniel Torres, a senior investigator with the Department of Justice's Office for Civil Rights. He'd heard about the story through the local news, but hadn't realized I was the father. When I explained everything, the stolen service dog, the falsified paperwork, the harassment of a disabled minor, his tone shifted from curiosity to outrage. "Send me everything," he said. "Every file, every photo, every document." I did, and Daniel did the rest. Over the next few weeks, I barely saw what he was working on. All I knew was that Karen started getting letters, real, official ones. They came in thick envelopes with federal seals on the corner. I'd see her retrieve them from her mailbox with shaking hands, her face pale as she scanned the return address. One day, she tore an envelope open right there on the curb, read a few lines, and staggered back inside. The neighbors noticed, too. "Looks like she's finally getting what's coming," old Mr. Patterson muttered as he watered his flowers. Even Buddy seemed calmer now. He still kept a protective eye on Lily, but he wagged his tail more, barked less. The two of them would sit on the porch after school, her small hand resting on his head, his ears twitching at every sound. It was their little ritual, a daily reminder that she was safe again. Then came the hearing. The HOA board had no choice but to cooperate when the Department of Justice got involved. A federal complaint had been filed citing violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, unlawful seizure of a service animal, and emotional endangerment of a minor. Daniel called me the night before. "She's going to try to plead ignorance," he warned, "but the evidence is airtight." The community center was packed the next day. Neighbors, reporters, even people from nearby towns came just to see the infamous HOA president face the music. Karen sat at the front table in a navy blazer, her hair perfectly coiffed, but her eyes were bloodshot. She refused to look at me or Lily. The investigator read the charges aloud, his voice firm but steady. Each word hit like a hammer: negligence, harassment, false reporting, discrimination. Karen tried to interrupt, claiming she didn't know the dog was a medical necessity. But then Daniel held up the shelter form, the one she'd signed, with her own handwriting stating "service animal left unattended." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The room was silent except for the scribbling of pens and the soft whir of a camera recording every word. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "My daughter," I said, "relies on that dog to live her life without fear. She can't run. She can't shout for help if she falls. But that dog can find her. That dog can keep her calm. You didn't just steal an animal, Karen. You stole her safety. You left her in the road like trash. And I hope you think about that every single day." Karen didn't respond. She just sat there, frozen, eyes glistening but defiant. The board voted to strip her of all HOA privileges permanently. The DOJ issued a civil penalty and ordered her to pay damages to my family. The police followed up with a misdemeanor charge for filing false documents. She wouldn't see jail time, but her reputation, her position, her self-made throne, they were all gone. And the neighborhood? It changed. People started smiling again. Neighbors waved. The HOA began hosting real community events instead of Karen's mandatory compliance meetings. Kids rode bikes down the cul-de-sac without being scolded for noise violations. And one afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Lily sat with Buddy by the porch again. She was laughing, a bright, unguarded laugh that I hadn't heard in months. "Daddy," she said, scratching behind Buddy's ear, "he's never leaving again, right?" I knelt beside her and smiled. "Never again, sweetheart." Buddy leaned his head against her shoulder and sighed, the kind of deep, content sound only a dog who knows he's home can make. Later that week, Karen's house went up for sale. The for sale sign appeared overnight, the grass overgrown, the blinds drawn tight. No one saw her leave. No moving truck, no farewell, just silence. Some said she moved to another state. Others said she couldn't face anyone anymore. But sometimes on quiet evenings, I'd still see her porch light flicker in my memory, like a ghost of all the power she thought she had. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's just the sound of peace returning. And that's exactly what we got.